I would like to announce our next panel, Second Layers. We have Roy Scheinfeld, who is going to moderate the panel. I'm kind of pulling my time here to see if everyone is arriving. He's the CEO of a company called Breeze. He's also visiting us from Tel Aviv. Correct. And then your panelists, Stephen Roos, the same libertarian socialist Bitcoiner, which we saw previously. Kukks, CTO of Ark-labs, or the evil scientist. And Tobias Seidel, co-founder of Stoker, I hope I pronounce it correctly, as well as Nifty Nay, or simply Lisa, who's, as I saw on the X, she's a runner, a host, a teacher, and also a founder of a company called Base 58. I'll then leave the stage to you guys. Enjoy the chat.
Thank you so much. Hi everyone, welcome to our panel on second layers. Maybe we'll start from introductions. You guys want to share what you're working on currently?
Yeah, I'm Stephen Roos. I'm CEO at a company called Second, and we're building an Ark implementation called Bark.
Hi, I'm Andrew Kukks. I'm CTO of Ark-labs, and we're building another Ark implementation called Arkade.
Hi, I'm Tobias Seidel. I'm co-CEO and co-founder of Stoker. Stoker is an investment platform, and we tokenize securities on Liquid.
Hi, I'm Lisa, also known as Nifty Nye. I'm a longtime contributor to Core Lightning, an open source implementation of the Lightning Network.
Okay, thank you all. It's very interesting, I think, to see the transition that we're making between talking about Lightning and now I don't think there's a Lightning panel on this conference for the first time in 8 years. We're talking about second layers. So let's, just to get started, let's talk about definition. What is a second layer? Steven?
Yeah, I think the definitions have been varying from people's perspectives. But I mean, for me, and I think for us in the Ark campus, second layer is a platform where you can make payments off-chain, but users at all times have a way to unilaterally exit on-chain, which means that even if any other party involved in the second layer disappears, they can always claim their money back without needing any permission from anyone. Yeah, I think that's for me the core value of a unilateral.
So you're mentioning one criteria, which is unilateral exit. Are there any others?
What was
criteria?
Criteria. For me, the unilateral exit is the core criteria.
Okay, got it. Anyone has a different opinion on what a second layer is?
For us, because like we are tokenized securities, right? For us, Bitcoin is actually the backbone of the future financial industry, right? And for us, it's very important that you have like confidential transactions, right? And and that you have a.
You're using Liquid, right?
Yeah, we are using Liquid.
Is
right?
Liquid a second layer?
We consider you can consider it as a side chain, but I think for us it's like a second layer, but because it's somehow like a channel to Bitcoin, right? And we love it because you have confidential transaction, but you have also like the possibility to do a whitelisting logic, right?
But you didn't answer my question. Is it a second layer?
I would consider it as a second layer. Yes.
So is Coinbase a second layer?
I think like, for example, I consider us, for example, as a third layer, sort of, right? Because like in the end, you integrate something on
I'm teasing.
Something.
I have a reason to tease you because, and I think that you all agree with me that it's getting more and more complicated to understand the different trust profiles, and that's kind of the future of second layers. I think things will get more and more complicated as time goes by. Lisa, what's your take on?
On second layers?
Yeah.
Oh, this is such a controversial topic, Roy.
Yeah, that's why we were having a panel.
I like to talk about second layers from a perspective of accounting or keeping track of who's moving money around. You know, the difference between, you know, I think it's hard to talk about layer 2 without talking about layer 1. I think one of the things with layer 1 is that it's slow. All your transactions to some extent are public. Everyone finds out about them. So when second layers get developed, some of the things that you try and change that are different than layer 1 is, well, you want transactions to go much faster, right? So there's a bunch of different, I think, maybe competing isn't the right word for it, but different protocols. But layer 2s are really about like, okay, we still want to be able to keep track or account for who owns what Bitcoin, but we want people to be able to update who owns what Bitcoin much faster, not on chain, so maybe more privately. Lightning, I think, is definitely an example of being the fastest. Though maybe Ark would disagree with that. So we have the fastest updates to your state and maybe some of the most private, but there's downsides to that, and that the trade-off is it's only point-to-point or peer-to-peer. So you run into other, I think, drawbacks with that kind of method of accounting of who owns Bitcoin.
And from a unilateral exit standpoint, you think a second layer must have a unilateral exit?
Well, Lightning has, the best unilateral exit trade-offs, I think, in terms of being able to take your Bitcoin, the ledger of who owns what Bitcoin that you keep track of in Lightning, and moving that back onto layer 1. Any party can decide to move their money out of that layer 2 at any point, which is what you mean by unilateral exit, right?
Yeah.
I think it might be a spectrum, right? I think from the true meaning of second layer, it's like any layer where things move around that also have a denomination of Bitcoin. And then it goes anywhere from like wallet of Satoshi and Coinbase to like what we call true second layers, which have a unilateral exit. And there, like you said, you have things like federated sidechains, you have things that are coming like the BitVM-based bridge sidechains, you have things like state chains and the Spark model. You have everything in between in that spectrum, and like, yeah, it's hard to, I think you can, from one perspective, you can call them all second layers. From another perspective, you can be like true second layers and like.
I feel like my opinion on it kind of changed over the years. As soon as you kind of start seeing like 100 different kind of second layers evolving or coming out, I feel like the only second layers around are going to be Ark-based ones and kind of Lightning. For the one reason, basically, like you have a UTXO, and that is the only thing that is actually powering your second layer. If you're bridging it and locking it in multi-sig somewhere, like it's not really powering the second layer. It's just being kept in a custody, in a albeit very complex custodian that is being on.
So basically, what you're saying, if I have a primitive on the second layer that I can broadcast to the chain, that means that it's a second layer. Otherwise, it's not really a second layer.
Yeah.
Okay.
I would say that.
That makes sense. What made you work on Ark, Kukks?
What made me work on Ark? Potentially burnout. Actually, I spent a long time working on dozens and dozens of Lightning solutions, primarily focused on consumers or small-time merchants. And it was just hard. It was very hard to get something that is acceptable, that I find acceptable.
What was the UX issues that you faced mostly?
Channel management, costs, users just not knowing what to do.
So Lightning is dead?
No, absolutely not dead. I just think it has changed priorities.
In what way?
In what way? Basically, I don't believe users, like small-time users, are going to be running it on their phone. Or a small merchant running it for a Lightning node themselves. We've seen now that basically Boltz took over the entire market. Not the entire market, but basically the consumer market for self-custodians, self-custody Lightning wallets. Like they're powering the entire ecosystem there because they really nailed it down. Users don't have to do channel management. They don't have to worry about things. They just have a single balance, a real unified singular balance.
Steven, you share the same opinion?
Yeah, I think so. I think Lightning will definitely keep its place because even within Ark, if you're making payments, like Lightning is a peer-to-peer model, right? So everyone connects with different peers, and you can reach everyone in the network. While Ark is a client-server model, so you can do Ark things between quotes within your Ark with other users that are using the same Ark. But once you need to go to someone else who's running a different Ark, or who's part of a different Ark, or who's not on an Ark at all, we're still using Lightning to bridge that gap. So Lightning is very good for like connecting the different dots in the whole Bitcoin ecosystem. It's like Nifty said, it's extremely fast, it's extremely efficient at large volumes, but it comes with an operational overhead that just end users who make a few payments a day maximum don't want to have. So I think Lightning definitely still it has its place, and we definitely don't want Lightning to disappear ever, because Lightning is the backbone of any of these other solutions as well.
Yeah, so I call it Lightning is becoming the common language, and Nifty, maybe as the educator here, can you explain why Lightning is evolving to take that role of being the common language between different subnetworks and different layer 2s?
Yeah, I think so. It's been really interesting watching Lightning develop since 2018, right? So like I started working on the Lightning Network almost 7 years ago now. And I think when it first came out, I think there was a lot of like messaging around the protocol that was like, this is gonna scale Lightning, we're gonna scale Bitcoin to 7 billion people. Is that even, are there that many people? I think that's like how big it is, right? So it's like, okay, this is the protocol that's gonna solve the scaling issue for Bitcoin. It's really incredible, like look at how many payments we can do and how quickly we can do them. And then I think, you know, as like maybe Kukks was kind of explaining a little bit about how he works with Lightning and the user experience just wasn't there. When you look at Lightning like as a protocol, how it works is very similar to something that we call like settlement banks, right? So the way that money gets pushed back and forth between two large parties that have a lot of exchange going on between them, and maybe like at least in the traditional banking system, a lot of big banks like in the U.S. maybe you have like Bank of America and J.P. Morgan Chase. These big banks have big settlement accounts between themselves, and they'll push money back and forth kind of at their level, like kind of high up. But they're really rolling up a lot of transactions that happened and other systems farther down the banking system, so to speak. And what I think we're seeing happening with Lightning is being used in between large exchanges or between maybe Arks. So like you'll have like a big service provider that's an Ark service provider. Or in the case of Liquid, you'll have like Liquid gateways, which basically means that Lightning is used to push kind of money between big players that have more of a direct point-to-point relationship over a long time. A lot of money is getting pushed back and forth between these larger people, and it's quite efficient use of capital to do that. But when you start getting out into where the consumers are, who maybe are doing more of a every day, like in the US, we have like Cash App or Venmo, where you're like doing small amounts less frequently to a number of people. The amount of payments that you're making, so to speak, is like a quite different pattern. And so the protocol that works for Lightning doesn't start to work as well, I think, at those edges. So what you end up getting is Lightning is like a core backbone of sending payments in second layer and Bitcoin across the ecosystem. But then when you get closer to the consumer, we've got all these really cool different protocols and solutions, such as what Arkade and Second are working on with Ark, the Liquid project that uses a side chain to do more transactions, that sort of thing. So
we have Fedi, we have Botanics, and we have a bunch of others that are in the works.
Cashu, I think, is a good one, yeah. And so those are, I think, you know, you kind of ended up with this like weird gradient, which I don't think anyone expected when Lightning got launched years ago, that we would have all these different options of how liquidity gets managed and the cost, et cetera. But I think one trend in general is that Lightning has kind of become the common language that all these different protocols use to interoperate, right? I mean, can you imagine having all these different systems and not being able to send money from Liquid to like Ark, for example, right? And so what you end up getting is this common kind of big pathway or backbone of the second layer payment system that uses Lightning. Sorry, that was a long conversation, but
yeah. But I think I agree. There are also kind of specific characteristics of Lightning that shine as Lightning evolving to be this interoperable layer. The fact that it's kind of stateless, like you need to only interact with the blockchain and maintain a private state is enough to use Lightning. You don't need any other global state. The fact that Lightning kind of incentivizes transactions, meaning the more fluid, the more velocity goes through Lightning, the more incentivized the nodes are. So it's kind of a incentivized flow, which is very unique at the protocol level. And I think also we need to give credit of Lightning getting to a critical mass. Lightning is a huge success. Every major exchange already supports Lightning. A lot of wallets already speaks Lightning. At Breeze, we're working with companies outside of the Bitcoin ecosystem to help them speak Lightning. So there's a lot of crypto companies that already speaks Lightning, and Liquid in that regard also speaks Lightning because of what Boltz did with the atomic swaps from Liquid into Liquid. You want to add something, Tobias?
I just wanted to add something because like we are working in the capital markets, right? So Stoker is like really bringing like digital securities on Liquid. And when you have like capital markets, you have like two legs, right? So you have a payment leg and you have an issuance leg or an asset leg. And in terms of Lightning, there is a big challenge, like because like it's a regulated field, right? And the regulators get very, very noisy, right? And they want to see like all the transactions. So on Lightning, you cannot do transaction monitoring. And that's like a big issue for the use case of Lightning. So this is like what we see is like.
It's a feature, not a bug.
Sorry?
It's a feature.
No, this is like an unfortunate thing, but I think like the EVM chains actually they have spoiled the regulators because all the transactions were actually visible. It's not the case in the legacy financial world, right? But now they see it's actually possible. Now they request it actually from any other solution on top of it, you know. And this is like a little bit of a downside, right? We have like this big challenge with it. But there are new solutions also on Lightning, like you know the LightSpark assets, for example. That's it's a very interesting solution. So they are working. I don't think it's really like Lightning.
LightSpark has two faces to the company. One is the LightSpark, which is Lightning software as a service entity, and now they have Spark, which is another second layer that is misrepresented here. I find it very interesting as well. Let's make it a bit more interesting, guys. Why there are two Ark implementations?
Because Ark is very exciting, and many people want to work on Ark.
Work on it together.
Why are there 3 Lightning implementations?
That's a great question. I still don't know. By the way, there are 5, and I still don't know how to answer that question.
I think there's a new Lightning implementation in C# that's coming out of Brazil recently. So
actually, maybe I have a good answer for that because, I mean, to your point, it doesn't make sense that there's many Lightning implementations because the thing with Lightning is peer-to-peer. The implementations actually have to do a lot of spec work. They need to be in accordance with each other. Like if one implementation speaks only a very tiny bit of information differently than the other one, everything breaks. So it's very, very hard.
Lightning is built from the ground up for interoperability, and that's why it's also being used as a common language between sub-networks right now.
Yeah. But to come back to Ark is not like that at all. So we have way more flexibility to take different paths. Like if one Ark wants to do something totally different than another Ark, we don't need to have a spec that we have in common. We don't need to talk because we talk over Lightning. So we can focus on one thing, another implementation can focus on another thing. We can use different programming languages. We can have different use cases we want to focus on, and just we have this.
I understand that, but why? Okay, but answer the question. Why did you decide to do any second implementation?
Well, I will not answer that on the stage.
I think we have different opinions of how to build, what we want to build.
Okay, don't spill all the beans, but say something that will make us understand.
I'm not a co-founder, so but we are building basically more of a general purpose direction rather than just payments.
Marco describes this as the offline execution engine, which I really like.
It's a cool way to look at it. Yes, basically we are able to execute arbitrary Bitcoin script off-chain, and we can basically bring back all the use cases back to Bitcoin.
So for you, it's not just payments, right?
No. We want to do many things. The easiest one to explain to people is Escrow because it's just very simple. We can't do standard Escrow on Lightning. That kind of evaporated a long time ago.
How Ark helps me do Escrow on Lightning?
So in Bitcoin, you can do, for example, multi-sig. 2 of 3, 3 of 5, whatever arbitrary number. We are able to do that inside Ark because we are executing Bitcoin script. Every single Ark transaction is actually a real Bitcoin transaction. We have the UTXO model. It's just instead of UTXO, it's a virtual UTXO, which allows us to do the exact same magic that Bitcoin brought us all together for.
And you don't share that philosophy of an offline execution engine?
We definitely share the philosophy of doing everything that you can do on Bitcoin off-chain in Ark. So we're definitely thinking of doing things like multi-sigs, enabling DLCs. I think that's also a big use case that right now is mostly happening on-chain. Some people try to build DLCs on Lightning, but the whole Lightning dynamic makes it really, really hard to do things like that. So on Ark, it becomes a lot simpler to do things like DLCs for loans, for trading. We definitely share that philosophy of enabling these things. I think they come second to payments. We want to focus first on solving payments, because if people cannot transact efficiently and easily, they cannot easily do other things like loans and trades and stuff like that. But yeah, it's definitely possible to do all those things because it's natively supported. Like VTXOs are UTXOs, Bitcoin supports it, we support it.
And can you support new opcodes in Ark?
No, we don't have an interest in supporting new opcodes.
Well, we have something.
Well,
in Arkade, we do offer basically a new primitive, which is ArkadeScript. It's our way of extending and making it better for developers to come back to Bitcoin, because one of the things that seems to have driven developers away was the lack of new opcodes or too much drama in actually getting something going again inside Bitcoin development. For us, we're off-chain. We have the Ark operator has to collaborate with every transaction that happens. So why not offer some extra features on top? And we offer this while also maintaining a unilateral exit.
Actually, I have a question for you. What, do you think like RGB is also a layer 2 solution in your opinion?
I think my definition of a layer 2 solution is to use Bitcoin as an asset. Like for me, layer 2, another criteria is Bitcoin needs to be the asset. If Bitcoin is not the asset, it means that you trust another entity, another thing to convert between the actual asset and Bitcoin as an asset. So to answer your question, in that regard, no. Like on RGB and Taproot assets are not.
It's an assets protocol, so it's an asset protocol. So I don't see it as something doing secondary things. I mean, you can issue tokens now on Bitcoin in a nice and private manner, in a very optimized way. But I don't know.
But I want to say another thing. Like, we need to understand that the world doesn't care on our definition of a layer 2. Yeah. Like, people don't give a fuck if it's a layer 2 or not a layer 2. People want to use Bitcoin. So let's allow people to use Bitcoin and in the way that they want to. And if they want to pass and to move USDT on Lightning, why not? Let's give them the ability to do that. Nifty, what excites you about layer 2s? Like, what are you kind of looking forward to?
I mean, so the thing that I've always been pretty interested in, well, there's a few things. Like, one of the reasons that working on Lightning is such a big passion of mine is that the ability to transact privately and really being able to use Bitcoin as a medium of exchange is like the thing that I think is like just really important from a civil liberties perspective. So, but in terms of like as an engineer and like a builder, the things that I get excited about on Lightning really have to do with like liquidity and like a little bit of like market design and how you're pricing the liquidity that moves through the layers, so to speak. So like one of the projects that I haven't been working on much lately, but I was like one of the main instigators for is like building a decentralized peer-to-peer marketplace for liquidity on Lightning using something called Liquidity ads, which really I think opened up a new market or like a new design space. Like, you know, then Lightning Labs created Pool. I think there's now a Lightning LSPS specs process that's building on like that original idea. Yeah, there's another like completely unfleshed out project that I would love to spend more time on that's about how to do pricing for payments that move through the Lightning network, how you're charging based on the availability of liquidity along a route. So yeah, I guess my focus really is like on how are we allocating liquidity to make payments possible? Is there efficient ways that we can design open market protocols to make the incentivize people to add liquidity to markets to these like layers? Because I think that's like a big aspect of different layer 2s. One thing that I think about a lot in terms of liquidity and like all of the new layer 2s that are coming out, and maybe this is a little spicy. Maybe spicy isn't the right word.
We like spicy.
So there's only, I think we all know and love that there's only 21 million Bitcoin. Every layer 2 or second layer as we've been calling them, needs liquidity in order to function. So what that means is it needs a little more Bitcoin allocated to it than is currently being used to send payments.
So support BIP 177, and then you'll have many more Bitcoins.
Oh, which is that? What BIPs does that
The
do?
John's proposal to rename Satoshis to.
Oh, okay. So like we just keep, so we not 21 million. Okay, but assuming that we stay with 21 million, I think one of the interesting things from like a liquidity market, like a market of liquidity perspective is, okay, so we're all competing for liquidity, for Bitcoins. There's only 21 million of them. So if someone takes their Bitcoin and puts it in a Lightning channel, that's Bitcoin that can't be used more or less for an Ark contract, right? Or if someone takes Bitcoin and
That's a very interesting perspective.
locks it into liquid, all of a sudden that's liquidity or Bitcoin out of, you know, I mean, there's less than 21 million, like there's only, yeah. You know, so, and then there's, you know, and like, so ETFs are sucking up Bitcoin.
But there's another dimension of using the liquidity more efficiently.
I see. Okay, yeah. Anyway, so this is like, I think in terms of like interesting things on second layers, I'm always like, okay, so which one of us is going to get more Bitcoin in terms of like locking it into the protocol? And how much are we paying, you know, the people who own the Bitcoin, or how is that getting attracted to your network to give it enough liquidity to be a useful protocol?
Let's talk about liquidity in Ark, because I think that's an interesting topic. Like,
I wanted to counter a little bit. You want to ask a question?
Go.
I wanted to counter that a little bit, because it's not like we need the liquidity to be there, or we need the money to be there so that the users can come. Users have money and they bring it into the protocol, right? If a user has some Bitcoin and they want to use Ark, they'll put that Bitcoin in the Ark and they'll use it. So it's not like we need to convince people that don't want to use Ark to first like put money in the Ark or whatever, or Liquid. Someone brings their Bitcoin into Liquid, then the Bitcoin is in Liquid, and that owner of that Bitcoin can use it in that platform.
But there's an additional liquidity requirement from an Ark standpoint, and it needs to be financially justified for the Ark to put their liquidity in the Ark.
Exactly, yeah. So then some protocols, especially Ark, is very interesting in that sense. They need some operational liquidity. So we're like also the operator, the server who's running the Ark needs some additional liquidity on top of what all the users bring to actually make the protocol function and work. Just like a little bit similar to in Lightning, you need the capacity sitting there for people to be able to make payments. But it's different because in Lightning, most of the capacities are actually the balances of the users in the channel, even though some of them are actually routing nodes.
I wish that was the case. If that was the case, the LSP model would have worked. That's definitely.
So you have the routing nodes and the LSPs who will also allocate liquidity. I think from the Ark perspective, I think we ran some numbers. We have a more efficient way as like a fraction of user liquidity that we need operational liquidity. So I think when it comes to operational liquidity, we're quite more efficient than the LSP model. But that's still definitely to figure out, because it depends a lot on user patterns. We still have to figure out what user patterns we'll see.
No, I just wanted to add, I think, of course, you can say like liquidity, you bring like bringing like sort of Bitcoin right on this kind of solution. But there's also like another leg. It's like I think like you can really create liquidity when you have also like other assets there. For example, like Liquid, we have like on Liquid we have tokenized like 1.2 billion already. So when you have like bigger investment products, also
you can always print money. I agree.
And then but it's a very, I think it's a very important point, because like it's like too one-dimensional to discuss only like okay on the payment side, right? You have to see also like that there's a huge adoption on the asset side.
Kukks, you wanted to add something
Yeah,
regarding Ark liquidity?
Yeah, Ark liquidity. I mean, I'm not too worried. We envision that most people are going to be doing their transactions in an unbounded environment. The virtual mempool is what we call it, where users are essentially, they have VTXOs, and they're just transacting, doing Ark transactions, and doing Ark transactions does not require any additional liquidity at that moment in time.
But Lightning transactions require additional liquidity.
Yeah,
Off-ramping required additional liquidity.
In Arkade, we are not planning to be the LSP. We anticipate swap providers to provide that service.
And that's the way that you'll aggregate external liquidity, basically.
Yeah.
Steven, what's your take on that?
Like,
one thing that kind of worries me in like operating in Ark is I can't really bring external liquidity in a non-custodial fashion.
You could. How so?
I need to bring my own Bitcoin in order to operate the Ark.
Yes, exactly, yeah. You mean we cannot
You can
non-custodially attract additional liquidity.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
But that's the same for Lightning. But then the thing with Lightning is you can distribute it. You can have multiple routing nodes that bring their own liquidity, run a service.
You can have a multi-LSP setup
Yeah.
fairly easily.
It is true that it's more centralized in Ark. It comes with its challenges, but like Kukks, we're not too worried. There's a lot of activity in the Ark that doesn't require too much liquidity. It's true that Lightning requires its own liquidity, refreshing requires liquidity, but we're not so worried about that.
I see we have the red screen already, so any closing remarks, starting with you, Lisa?
No, I mean, I'm really excited and proud to see all these like new second layer options that we have in Bitcoin. I think it really makes the Bitcoin ecosystem quite unique even in the wider crypto space. So we have common protocols for doing transactions and all these other things that all interoperate, and users are able to send Bitcoin across them with very little hassle. So I think that's something as an ecosystem of developers and engineers and even users that we should be very proud of. So.
Tobias?
I think my final remarks, I think we see the biggest challenge is like adoption, right? Further adoption in this space, and with any new solution is coming in, you add new functionalities. But I think we have also like to think about the, of course it's very obvious, the user experience. Like we have to think about like wallet integrations. You have like to think about or even like sort of smart contracts facilities, right? To make a more elaborated financial system and to get more sophisticated investment structures. So I think that, we are very happy that there's something happening in this space, and it was like LightSpark, as you mentioned, or what you guys are doing. So I think it's we see it very positively that there's so many things happening on layer 2. So yeah.
I just want to say that I'm really happy that we're in the state we are today.
Agree.
Like at least there's something happening now. Ark and our implementation Arkade is very close to mainnet. In fact,
I mean, very close to many. I think I paid for coffee using Arkade.
There we go. A little Easter egg, like this entire conference, all the payments happening are actually running on Ark right now. They're Lightning enabled, so you don't even notice with your Lightning wallet, but everything is being powered by Ark.
How many payments?
Good number, I think probably around 800, 900, 1,000 right now.
That's very impressive.
Yeah. Thank you. And it looks like it's been a very successful incognito event that we tried out. We'll hope to go for a very public mainnet in the coming months.
Coming back to second layers, I think I'm super excited about second layers in general. I think we had some kind of Bitcoin winter where there was a lot of focus on Lightning and not much new innovation came out, but the last year or two has been amazing. We've seen things like BitVM, Citria, Shielded CSV. We've seen all kinds of stuff come up, and I think it's only going to continue. It's going to be very exciting. I can't wait until maybe we get some form of covenant in Bitcoin, and I think it's going to explode again, and we're going to see a whole lot other things again. So yeah, very exciting.
Well, if I add another 30 minutes, we will talk about that, because that's a really interesting topic. But thank you so much, guys, and good luck. And not just as a closing remark on my end, I also kind of completely agree with the sentiment. I feel that Lightning kind of found its place as the common language of Bitcoin, connecting between these different subnetworks, and the fact that we'll have flexibility to adopt the right solution for the right user base will give us a lot of power in Bitcoin adoption going forward. So thank you.
Thank you for moderating.